She took everything from me. Now she needs my help. Do I forgive or let them pay the price? This is about my sister Carol. Well, I'm gonna call her by her real name, because who cares? There's no better way of saying this, but yeah, Carol lured my fiancé into her skirts because she felt he was too handsome and rich for a plain-looking girl, me. She thought he deserved someone gorgeous, so she offered herself and that dumbastic married her. Good for them because I got rid of a cheater and found someone who actually deserved me. Hear me out. This is gonna be a long one because it goes back from 15 years ago when I was in my mid-20s. Now I am 41. Carol is 6 years younger to me and a complete opposite personality. She's that girl who gets the most attention in all family and social gatherings, and she ensured that she got one. Right from our childhood, she was more focused on getting dressed up and hanging out with friends. No doubt, she's pretty and what you call dead-drop gorgeous, and she's proud of it. She leaves no opportunity to flaunt her superficial beauty and look down upon others who don't fit her beauty standard like me. She was always critical of my dressing sense and made fun of my not-so-social nature. As a kid, I was more inclined towards academia, so I was mostly seen with my books and comics instead of putting makeup on my Barbie. I didn't even own a Barbie. Carol and I never shared a sisterly bond. She considered herself to be a fashionista while I was a plain-looking girl. That's what she called me, plain. Well, she was right to an extent. I'm a simple woman with no pomp and show, no over-the-top drama for attention. I'm calm and composed and like to be in my own space. Very early on, I left home for my high school and I couldn't be more relieved. Who wants to be around an entitled brat? Life was pretty much fun with my busy schedule in medical school. I used to visit home during holidays or spring break, and that too I kept my trip short. Things got straightened out with Carol as we had minimal encounters. Carol dropped out of high school to pursue a career in fashion. Later, she again dropped out of fashion school for a modeling career. Until I was in touch with her, she got 2 photo shoot projects for a local apparel brand in 5 years. I'm not sure if we can call this a successful modeling career, which she often refers to. If you think I'm mean, hold on. After I moved out of the house, the bitterness between Carol and me subsided. We met twice a year for a few days. She didn't get enough opportunity to piss me off, so we were cool. In my freshman year in college, I met Smith. He was quite senior to me. He was pursuing his master's while I was in freshman year for a bachelor's degree. Besides, he had a couple of years of hands-on experience as a duty doctor. He was specializing as a heart specialist, one of the most reputed specializations. To add a cherry to the cake, he was handsome. He used to give lessons on the subject of the circulatory system to freshman students to earn some extra bucks and brush up his knowledge. He was popular for his simple teaching methods. More popular amongst the girls because you know who doesn't want to take lessons from a blue-eyed, tall, lean, and well-built university senior? I also took lessons from him and eventually we started dating. In my final year of college, he proposed to me. After dating him for 4 years, I had no reason to say no. He was already working at a hospital by then. During holidays, when I went home, Mom saw the ring on my finger and asked. In the happy moments of festivities, I told her everything. She jumped in excitement because it is not usual that I get serious with anyone. Smith was the first guy I ever dated or had sex with. Mom asked me the details about Smith because she sniffed our marriage on the cards. Carol often used to say that I'm never going to find a good man to marry me. By good, she meant rich and handsome. Whenever she got know that I was seeing a guy, she would remark, he's so gonna run away. Your relationship won't even last for a week. So when Carol got to know about Smith, her eyes lit up and she wanted to know more about him. It was kinda unusual for her to take an interest in my life because it has always been very boring. I asked, why you want to know about him? She said, he's going to be family, so I should know him. Mom asked me to call him for dinner on New Year's Eve. Later, I got to know that Carol had asked Mom to invite Smith. We didn't have any plans for that year, so Smith agreed to tag along. When we reached home, we were greeted by Carol. It was quite surprising because Carol is a party person. She's never seen home on weekends. On New Year's, she is off for a week-long party with her friends, but this time she was at home. Quite surprising. Should have been alarming, right? But I didn't get bothered. I don't give a shit about others' life. I went home with Smith and my sister was floored by Smith. Her first comment was, I thought you to be rich, but you're handsome too. Her flirtatious gestures were just so evident. It was just right on my face, yet I didn't take any heat. I was secure in my relationship. Throughout the evening, she made moves at him by complimenting him trivially, touching his arms and thighs unnecessarily, and forcing a conversation with him. She sat next to him at the dinner table. I gave her a look and she made a cute pout and said, you get to sit with him every day. Today I can be his arm candy. Everyone chuckled and we took it as light fun. During the conversation, she got to know that Smith goes for a walk after his dinner. As soon as he cleaned up after the dinner, she offered to give him a tour of the neighborhood. Smith looked at me while I sat there with a straight face, not knowing what to say. Smith replied with an awkward yes, and they both went out for a walk. That night, while we were driving back from my parents' place, Smith asked me if I noticed how Carol was flirting with him. I laughed and brushed it off, saying she's an attention seeker. I thought Smith wasn't so shallow that he would fall for superficial beauty, but dang, he did. He was equally mesmerized by Carol's charm, and he cheated on the first opportunity he got. A few months later, I had my final year exams. As usual, I cut down on our hangouts to focus on my studies. Eventually, I found him cutting down the communication. When I confronted, he said he wanted me to focus on my finals. I was too busy to suspect any foul play. On the last day of my exam, I asked him to pick me up from college. He said he was busy. Later that night, I called him to check upon him. He said he was home but was too tired and ready to doze off. I went to his place to surprise him, but it was locked. I called him again, but he didn't respond. I waited for his call the next day, but he didn't call back. Shamelessly, I called him again and asked him why did he lie the last night. He said he forgot to mention that he crashed at his colleague's place. Stupid me. Didn't read this to be any signal. How would I? This was the first time anything such was happening to me. This continued for a week until my lost marbles came back to senses. I asked him on point blank if he wanted to break up with me. He hesitated for a few seconds before murmuring a yes. He said he no longer loved me. That was it. That last conversation we ever had. I didn't ask what, when, how. Heartbreak is always painful, and that too without any reason. Even more. He left me with a sense of insecurity, self-doubt, and many unanswered questions which he didn't answer and neither did I ask. Took months and many bottles of single malt whiskey, but eventually, I moved on. Glad that he broke up after my finals, else I would have taken one more year to finish up medical school. 7 months later, I got a call from Carol, and she invites me for her engagement. I congratulated her and asked about the guy. She didn't say the name and asked me to come to the party and meet him in person. I was happy for her. Yes, it saddened me for a while that I was supposed to be married during that time, but I was single and nursing my breakup. I tried to forget my miserable life and showed up at my sister's engagement. As soon as they entered the venue, I saw the board as Carol and Smith. It gave me shivers down my spine, but I calmed down myself saying Smith is too common a name. He might be someone else. But as I went inside, I ran into 2 of Smith's friends. They turned other side when they saw me coming. My heartbeat raced as I went near the podium where Carol was supposed to be sitting with her fiancé. The moment I saw Smith sitting with her, his arms wrapped around hers, I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there with tears in my eyes. The next I remember was my mom pulling me to a corner and asking me to behave. She asked me not to create any scene there and let everyone be happy. She said no one knows about our past and she would like to have it that way. I cried out loud and yelled, "You knew everything and yet you let this happen. Carol is a bitch, you all are evil, you all are in this together." I saw Carol coming with an evil smile. It was like 15 years ago, yet I remember every word of her so clearly. That was the most humiliating moment of my life. She said, "You thought you could have this man," pointing towards Smith. "Handsome, tall, rich, and you so plain. No way. You don't deserve him. You deserve someone plain like you. Do you see how beautiful we look together and how people are adoring us? Oh my God, so cute couple. Ha, everyone would have laughed to see you beside him." I wanted to slap right across her face, but my mom stopped me and asked me to leave. She thought I was there to stop the engagement. She was yelling at me, "Why did you come here? Don't you have any self-respect?" I said I didn't know that this bitch is effing him. Had I known, I would have never shown my face. Carol denied to have invited me. She lied to Mom that she didn't invite me. Mom has asked her not to invite me because I would be hurt. But Carol deliberately invited to humiliate me. I left the place bawling and howling. My breakup pain bounced back. It would be an understatement to say that it was difficult. It was the most traumatic phase of my life. The lowest point, I would say. Luckily, I graduated with a good grade and got into a good hospital with hectic duty hours. I barely got time to think about anything. I deliberately kept myself busy on off days. I moved on. Years later, I met my husband at work. He's the board member of the hospital chain at work. We dated for 4 years and got married, and now we are proud parents of 2 kids. Fast forward to a week ago when I got a call from an unknown number. I answered the call, and the person identified herself as Carol. Even after hearing her name, it took me a few seconds to realize she was my sister. P.S. Few of my patients' names are also Carol. I asked her why she called me. She was acting all so sweet, asking about my life and all. The Carol I know, she won't spare a second on me without any motive. I said, "Cut the crap and say what you want." She remained silent for a moment and said, "Actually, I need help. My husband, Smith, has gotten into trouble. A patient got post-surgery allergy and the hospital might sack him." I was like, "What can I do about it?" She said that Smith worked at one of the hospital chains whose board member is my husband. So my husband could save him from any severe punishment. I had zoned out. I snapped at her not to call me ever again and we ain't gonna help them. I didn't know that Smith was working for the same hospital chain as me. He was working at a different location. I looked up at the employee portal of the hospital and found Smith, but his current status showed suspended. I wanted to discuss this with my husband, but I didn't want to dig out my past, so I let this slide. 2 days back, my mom showed up at my door. I felt like I had seen a ghost. I cut them off since Carol's engagement day. She hugged me and cried, saying it was so good to see me after so many years. But I knew that her underlying motive behind all the sweetness was to save Smiths at SS. My husband was home at that time. He heard out Mom's plea for helping her golden son-in-law. My husband said Smith is accused of medical negligence and there's an ongoing investigation against him. He said there's nothing he could do, and even if he could, he won't do it. He doesn't exercise his power for personal benefit. My mom bit her lips and left without saying a word. Yesterday, my husband came back from work and said that Smith's investigation had been concluded. He would be sacked from his job, but my husband has the power of letting him retain his medical license against a hefty penalty amount. He said he could ask the other board members to go lenient on Smith and not forward his case to state healthcare for further investigation. Now I'm at a fix. Should I forget my humiliation and help Smith, or should I make him pay the price of his deeds? I being a doctor, know how difficult it is to get a medical degree, and losing the license is the worst thing that happened to a doctor. Update 1, there was no need to post it here and get the opinion of you guys. What Carol and my mother did after that day had made it clear that they don't deserve any help. They are anything but narcissistic. Carol and Mom have been hurling abuses at me on social media. I don't use Facebook much. This week when I opened it, I found I was tagged on several posts by Carol where she called me vindictive bitch for framing her husband. She has written a long post that I was jealous of her because Smith had dumped me and married her, and I was doing all this to avenge my betrayal. My mom had also jumped on the bandwagon and said that I had abused them and cut them off because I couldn't stand Smith getting married to Carol. Extended family has taken their side and commented that I had taken revenge too far by ripping off Smith's livelihood. Even Smith has commented that I was delusional and that he never loved me and had never proposed to me. He had always loved Carol liked wheat. I immediately untagged myself and blocked them. I told my husband not to spare Smith from any of the charges. In fact, he should be punished at the maximum for each of his felonies. My gave me a smirking look and said he had never seen me this angry. So, Smith was officially sacked from the hospital and his case has been forwarded to the state healthcare department for license cancellation. So, a fresh investigation would be conducted by the government body, and if he is found guilty of the charges that the hospital is claiming, he would lose his license and also get a prison time. That's like a cherry on the cake. We'll update as the situation progresses. Right now, I'm enjoying the drama with a basket of popcorn. Yum yum. Edit, small clarification. Carol and my mom were not added to my social media account. The thing is, I have an open account so anybody could tag me in their post. I had not blocked them earlier because 15 years ago, I wasn't using social media. Now they are blocked from social media and also my life. Update 2, how low can a person stoop? Now I know. So, Smith showed up at my workplace. Like I said, he worked for the same hospital chain as me but different location. He posed himself as a patient and came inside my chamber. He knew that there was no way I would have met him if he had come to see me. I immediately asked him to leave. He said he has paid a fee to consult me, so as a doctor I should treat him. Fair enough. I listened to his problems. Meanwhile, I swiftly switched on the voice recorder on my phone. I did this so that he couldn't trap me in another mess, and glad I did. He was faking his health condition that he has gotten flu and all. I acted professional and gave him the medication as per his symptoms. But he wasn't ready to leave and unnecessarily asked stupid questions. He started flirting. I asked him to stop and leave. He said, I wanted to apologize to you long back. I didn't intend to hurt you, but your sister trapped me and made me sleep with her. Then she blackmailed me to marry her, else she would press molestation charges on me. I asked him to stop right there because all he spoke was complete BS. I could have called the security on him, but I was damn enjoying his desperateness. Revenge is so sweet, I tell you. I heard him out with a satisfied smile. He went on to say, I know you still love me. That's why you're still hurt and want to take your revenge. Honestly, I still feel for you. I regret marrying Carol. If you can convince your husband to save me from prison time, I promise I'm gonna leave Carol and be your lover. You don't need to leave your husband, but we can secretly have our own thing. That douchebag had the audacity to say this. I burst out in laughter and called security on him and asked him to leave. He had no idea that he was being recorded. The disappointment on his face was so satisfying. He thought he convinced me. LOL. I texted Carol and wanted to send her the recordings of her low-life husband. I said your loser husband visited my clinic posing as a patient. She said, I know. He tells me everything. We also know that you still love him. I can let you sleep with him for a night if you can save his license and prison time. Her response blew my mind. No point talking to her any further. They are together in this dirty game. I told my husband about this and he was aghast. He said we could have sued them for offering bribes, but it would dig out my painful past. I said let him handle one charge at a time, but I'm gonna do my bit to extract my revenge. I added Carol, Smith, my mom, and other relatives on Facebook. Carol and Smith accepted it at once. Maybe they took it to be a positive sign for me. Then I wrote a long post about how Carol, Smith, and my mom had been trying to manipulate me to help Smith skip prison time. I attached the screenshot of the conversation with Carol. I also turned the voice recordings into a still video with Smith in Carol's picture with the voice running in the background and uploaded it. That post just blew up with comments. I blocked Carol, Smith, and Mom because I knew they would retaliate. My extended family and relatives expressed their disgust about Carol offering to let Smith hook up with me to get away with his negligence. Carol and my mom tried to contact me, but I had blocked their calls and voicemails. I spent the whole of yesterday and today reading the comments on the post. People have gone next level trolling Carol and Smith. My weekend couldn't be better. Now on to the next story. Discovered my wife's year-long affair when our kid's bus driver accidentally revealed their secret. The desperate voicemail she left him after I kicked her out. At the time of this story, my wife and I were together for 10 years and had 2 sons under the age of 6. My wife was very close to her aging mother and made sure to include her in our family life, even though she lived in a retirement home. Once a week, we'd all go visit her and bring a collection of our son's toys for them to show her. Soon thereafter, my wife encouraged the boys to make gifts for their teachers and bus driver with Grandma's help. At the same time, she started taking her mom out to sightsee and spend some one-on-one time together. The routine was, she'd get the kids off the bus and then start getting ready to go out. Over time, she started seeing her mom twice a week by herself and every other Sunday with all of us. This was a lot, but even still, her mom would always say how much she missed us. I wondered how that could be if she was taking her out all the time, but I just dismissed the thought. One day, my wife had gotten the kids off the bus and came back inside, cheerful as ever. She skipped upstairs to get ready for another outing with her mom. My boy asked to watch a show, so I grabbed my wife's phone off the charger and noticed several missed calls from my son's bus driver. They were both home safe and sound, so I couldn't imagine why there would be so many missed calls from him. I tried to call him back, but found that my wife changed the lock on her phone. Instinct took over as I downloaded an app on my phone to disguise my number as my wife's. I set the call to record before I dialed his number. As soon as he answered, he said, "Hi love, are you ready for the special date I promised you?" I hung up as soon as I heard this. I went upstairs to find my wife as she got ready, and she looked ravishing. You could tell she was going on a special date. As soon as she saw me, she started downplaying how nice she looked and explained that her mom wanted her to take pride in her appearance, no matter what the occasion. I played the recording of the bus driver's voice, and her perfume bottle fell from her hand, smashing to pieces on the floor. She immediately became desperate, begging me to just hold on a minute and listen to her. But I still grabbed the car keys. On my way out with the boys, I insisted that she still have App come get her and never bring her back. She was too panicked to cry, just hyperventilating and saying she would have nowhere to stay because her home was with me and the boys. I refused to give in to her. I called the bus driver again, this time on speakerphone. He answered in a weary tone. I told him I knew what was going on and he needed to come pick up my wife because she belonged to him now. He quickly told me to slow down, that he was married, and he didn't want to get involved in any drama. My wife's face fell when she realized just how bad her situation was. I just shrugged and hung up while my wife started redialing his number in vain. Just before I left, I heard her leave a voicemail, telling him he needed to come pick her up and get her a place to stay because this was all his fault. I suppose she continued calling him late into the night, until she found his wife on social media and publicly begged her to tell him to call her, because she needed to speak with him urgently. This obviously raised suspicions that led to her discovering the truth. My wife had been dating and sleeping with her husband, our children's bus driver, for an entire year. I had no idea it had been going on at all, let alone for so long. I felt like an idiot for failing to look into my wife's whereabouts sooner, but I truly believed she was spending time with her mom. She was, but only very rarely. App's wife slandered my wife's name through the school and all over town. App was so ashamed and to do whatever it took to gain his wife's forgiveness. He ghosted my wife and even stopped getting on social media. He tried in vain to prove loyalty to his wife in the hopes things could go back to normal. They never did, for any of us. My wife was mortally embarrassed that her lover had given her up at the first sign of trouble, and that in her attempts to get his help, she broke his family apart and made things worse for herself. I also ghosted her, until a visitation schedule was made and I was awarded primary custody. Her desperate affair cost her reputation, self-confidence, and family. She isn't the same as she was, and I doubt she'll ever be. I'm thankful I'm not the one that has to figure out how to live with myself without my kids because of some stupid mistake that shouldn't have happened. App even apologized to me, explaining that when he started seeing my wife, he was in a bad place in his own marriage. He justified seeing my wife by deciding that he only needed to rely on someone emotionally. Emotional support turned into physical, and then before he knew it, they were living a double life and got caught red-handed. Next story, my daughter was born from my ex's affair, but I've raised her as my own. Now, my dad doesn't want her in his will. When my M45 daughter F13 was born, I immediately felt something was obviously amiss. She was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, which was extremely unlikely for a child of my own and that of my ex-wife F39. I am very Mediterranean and have olive skin, dark eyes, and dark hair. My ex-wife has brown eyes and relatively dark brown hair. Her skin is barely lighter than mine. The baby also clearly bore no resemblance to me or anyone in my family at all. I had been having misgivings about my ex, too, and she seemed too quick to express surprise and make excuses. Still, though, I didn't want to throw away my marriage over what could have been my own misunderstanding of genetics, so I signed the birth certificate. I instantly knew that I was going to have a paternity test done, but something else surprised me. When I brought our little girl home, I still fell in love with her. It felt like bringing my son M14 home, and, looking at her, I still saw her as an innocent, beautiful little baby. We bonded. The paternity test came back negative, as I suspected it would, and I decided that our marriage was over. I still loved our little girl, though. My then-wife did everything that she could to drag out the divorce and refused to separate or move out. My daughter's biological father, every bit as blonde and blue-eyed as I suspected, turned out to want nothing to do with her or my ex. He was already married to his own family, and his only focus was preventing the situation from blowing back on himself too much. My ex went totally nuts when both I and her, a fair partner, rejected her, and she made some very unfortunate decisions. To make a long story short, she ended up with prison time for crimes including identity theft, assault with a deadly weapon, and grand theft auto. When she stole credit cards and forged documents for both of us, and when she stole her affair partner's car and tried to run him over with it. I ended up with custody of our kids, with the affair partner never even attempting to establish any kind of paternity rights. I didn't want to press the issue myself, as I couldn't deny that I had bonded with this child, even knowing that she wasn't my real daughter. I had been shunning my ex-wife as best I could and trying to move on with life after she was finally out of the house. It wasn't long before I got together with and married my current wife, F34, and we've since had another 2 children, M10, F8. My eldest daughter is a total daddy's girl, and we have a wonderful relationship. She always feels loved, and I treat her the same as my other kids. Even though she obviously stands out, my family accepts her too, or at least that's what I thought. I work for my father's company, and the other day we were out talking about the future and his will, and he was talking about money assets, setsack. He wanted to leave to whom, including his grandchildren, and I noticed that my older daughter had been left out. I mentioned it to him, and he said, "It's nice what you've done for daughter's name, but you have real children, and obviously they should come first." I interrupted him and told him that she was my real daughter and that I thought she should be treated equally. He just paused and looked at me for a moment, and he said, "I guess you feel how you feel," before he noticed I was still about to argue with him. And he shrugged and moved the conversation on to things about work and my siblings. I was too polite to try to force the matter at the time, but it sort of stuck with me. My father isn't the type of man to harp on a point, and I am certain that he's content to have said his piece and would let the matter drop. He could certainly tell that what he said upset me, and so I doubt he'd bring it up again. Frankly, he sort of raised me the same way. At the time, I was shocked because he always seemed to accept my daughter as a part of the family. He buys her gifts for her birthday and Christmas, and he makes her feel welcome, but thinking about it, he really is just a kind, polite, and generous man in many ways. He will buy Christmas gifts for high school friends or significant others if he knows they are coming, and the same for other gift-giving occasions. He's generally very hospitable to anyone his friends or family bring around, so I thought that maybe it was just that, and I misinterpreted. My wife is Asian, and so my eldest daughter always stands out. She's thin, blonde, and blue-eyed, unlike pretty much anyone else in my family, and she's taller than any of the other girls or even most of the women, really. So I'm aware that she might look like the neighbor kid visiting or something. My wife loves her, and I know that she 100% accepts her as one of our kids, and she has been a great stepmom. I talk to my own mother, though, and while she's definitely closer to my daughter than my father's, they interact a lot more. And she includes my daughter with the other kids, other girls, and family traditions and activities. I got a little bit of the same vibe from her. She was much more diplomatic, but it seems like she may also consider my daughter a guest unfortunate orphan I'm hosting or something like that. She pointed out that I can make my own will however I want. My daughter knows that she isn't biologically mine. That would have been hard to hide, even if we'd really had the opportunity. She doesn't want anything to do with either of her biological parents, though. She's seen her bio dad perhaps a handful of times in her entire life, and I don't even think he can remember her middle name. He seems to have pretty successfully kept his family together and his wife from leaving him, but he definitely doesn't want any involvement. My ex-wife continued to spiral for a long while, and she lives in another state with another man and her own new family at this point. She mercifully rarely makes contact. I've never really tried to go after either of them for money. I don't need it, and it's not a pot I want to stir. My siblings are mostly supportive, if a little bit mixed on the issue. Some of them say that they could never raise the child of a partner's affair, but all of them say that they love and accept their niece. I just can't get over the way that I feel distant and upset about what my father said, though. He's extremely kind and generous, and he's always cared for his family. He's given me opportunities and a lifestyle that I could never have achieved without him. I love him, and I look up to him. Maybe that's why I feel sort of, betrayed. It feels wrong that she's the only one of his grandchildren to be left out of his will, apparently because he doesn't consider her a real grandchild. Intellectually, I can accept that he's technically correct, but it feels wrong. She is my daughter. Am I wrong, though? Am I just being entitled and unreasonable here? Am I the asshole? Some people seemed surprised at the way I let my daughter's bio parents off the hook, so to speak. The main reason I've never tried to go after my ex or her affair partner for child support is that my daughter is more important than money. I'm not struggling at all and have the support I need. More importantly, though, I have my daughter. Even though the affair partner didn't apparently want anything to do with her, my lawyer did mention way back in the day that either he or my wife, being her biological parents, could have a strong case for seeking custody. I know I'm biased, but her bio dad seems like a huge asshole, and I know he doesn't care about her. I wouldn't put it past him to try to get custody, just to duck out of paying child support, though, if his hand was forced. And I don't even want to think about the idea of her having to go stay with him. Kind of the same thing when her mom got out of prison. She seemed like she was very quick to shack up with her new guy, and she seemed willing to let the matter lie, so I did the same. The fact that neither of them tried to get her, or, in my ex's case, The way she hasn't even bothered to keep much contact with our son tells me more than everything I need to know about the kind of parents they are would be. They only seem interested in their pre-existing new families, respectively. I wouldn't want to try to back them into trying to take custody. With my daughter being 13, it's possible that we've sort of run out the clock on that matter, but it's still not drama we need or a risk worth taking. I talked with my dad about better and more important news. I met with my father for lunch, which was easy enough as he's around most days and we could sync up some time. I mentioned that I wanted to talk about my daughter not being in his will, and I told him that even if it meant dividing what was being left to me or my other kids, I felt it was really important for her to be included. I also mentioned, as I felt and as a lot of people pointed out, that it would be devastating for her to find out that she'd been excluded after his death. My father agreed that that was a really good point. And he said that she is a lovely girl, that he does love her, and that he wouldn't want to add extra pain or bitterness to her life, especially at such a time. Also, it had gotten around to him that I'd been sort of pulling my siblings a little bit, and I think my mom talked to him some, and he said, "This is obviously very important to you. You're my son. I can just change it. It's not so much money anyway," and he was right. The amounts of money left to individual grandchildren aren't massive, but the gesture and the thought are most meaningful. Mostly, everything is going to my mom or us, his kids anyway. Really, there was no reason for me to expect him to have been stubborn or hard-hearted about any of this. It was just something that we needed to talk about. My father reiterated that everyone loves my daughter and that she'll always be family and always have a home. He has a gold bracelet that he has worn occasionally over the years, and he mentioned that my daughter thought it was pretty. When she was very little, she noticed it on his wrist and said that jewelry was for girls. He laughed and explained to her that sometimes boys wear jewelry, too. She thought it was nice, and he let her try it on even though it was way too big for her wrist. She was a little toddler then. I didn't know about that moment between them, and I thought it was really sweet that he remembered. He said that he was going to leave her the bracelet and a note, and that as far as money goes, she'd get the same share as the rest of my kids. So we had a nice lunch and felt better about it. It was not too dramatic, but it was the best way things could have gone.